Mike, thank you very much, and that was very kind of you. And it is great to have a chance to, even though this is remotely, to talk to an audience of Galesburgers. I know we are flung across the country a little bit here. Santa Monica, where I used to live. Jimmy Sundberg is back at home in Texas, and Dick Lindstrom is wearing his Chicago Blackhawks jersey. So, and he wanted to be proud to make sure that we noticed all of that. And I feel more comfortable because I know that Trent Cox is online and that he is indeed a St. Louis Cardinals fan. So that helps me feel a little bit more relaxed right now and understood the sorrow we felt a couple of weeks ago with the passing of Lou Brock, who had a tremendous impact on me as a young guy. And let's not forget that I am here in Tennessee because of the grounding I got in life's understanding and how to get along with people while growing up. And I think maybe the best place to grow up for a guy like me, it was anyway, Galesburg, Illinois. And yes, I went off to school, moved away, have not lived in Galesburg since 1973, but I still think so very fondly of it and the people who were there. And can't be more thankful for having had the experiences that I did in Galesburg. And really, from going across pro sports, okay, here's the story. How did I first really get on mic? And it was because I was working with one of the mentors, the late Joe Morrissey, sports editor at the Galesburg Register-Mail. He had me first come in just to take calls on prep games as they would come in. There was no Sunday edition of the Register-Mail then, so we didn't do it on Saturday nights. But once he was caught short and needed somebody to call, or rather to cover, Acosta at Deer Creek Mackinac game. And so he sent me out there to cover the game. Well, for some reason, there were 3 different radio broadcasts going on in that tiny press box that night. And the guy who was doing the play-by-play, his color commentator was Roger Dean. So you can guess the play-by-play caller was Jim Swickard. And Jim and Roger were the morning men on WAIK. Well, if you're morning men and it's Friday night, you just had a long work week, and it's about 8:30 at night, you are powered largely by coffee. Swick had had too much coffee in his system. He had to go down the ladder, find a porta-john or whatever on the premises there, and handed me the mic and said, "Here, you take it." And so a guy who, along with my brother, growing up, we had done impressions of Chet Huntley and David Brinkley. I played David because I was more like this in any case, and that's just the way it went. Well, so that's what kicked in right at that point in time. And then the next year when I went to Notre Dame, I got involved with the campus radio station, and everything just sort of organically, and maybe for me orgasmically, developed from there. So that was a chance to do college hockey. And how long ago was that? I left school and was going to work for the NBC affiliate in South Bend and was in for an interview to do the Notre Dame hockey broadcasts. As I was sitting in the reception area, NBC broke in and said, attention, Hank Aaron has just tied Babe Ruth, hitting his 714th home run today off Jack Billingham of the Cincinnati Reds. So that was April of '74, getting prepared for the fall and the hockey season and all that. And that was the day that I got hired, and really is, in many ways, I know we've built on top of that, but in many ways, the reason I was able to even get to this point, or to doing, and because I was doing Notre Dame hockey, I got hired for the Los Angeles Kings, because the voice of the Kings had been the voice of the Wisconsin Badgers, and we were in the same conference. And he was aware of me, and when the opening came up, he called me, and he said, would you like to move? And there was a conference call. The director of broadcasting at the Forum was another Central Illinois guy named Francis Dale Chick Hearn, and he asked if I would mind moving from Buffalo to Los Angeles, and I didn't think about it too darn long. And went straight out there, and that is the beginning of the journey. And I don't want to turn this into a 5,000-watt radio station in Fresno, California, but I think you capture my drift. I'm ready for any questions you might have. Happy to keep you up with what's going on in the NHL. We're going into Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final tomorrow night. And as you may or may not know, hockey and basketball have been all played in a bubble. And there have been 2 bubbles in Canada, Toronto and Edmonton, and now the Stanley Cup Final is in Edmonton. And if there is any place, if you were afraid that coronavirus could not exist in a cold environment, I can't think of a better place to go than Edmonton, Alberta. But they've had over 3,000 tests and no positive results having come in yet. So it is Dallas going against Tampa Bay, the 2 most southern NHL teams, and they're playing in Edmonton, Alberta to determine the championship for the Stanley Cup in 2020. I'm open for questions, guys, ladies.
Pete, I've got a question for Pete. How good was the Notre Dame hockey team? We think of Notre Dame as a football school. So how were they very good at hockey?
Yeah, it was a brand new D1 program at the time, and we had 7 draftees one year by the National Hockey League, and the World Hockey Association was in play then too. One guy came off that team and really made it big. Unfortunately, he is no longer with us. He was one of those who fell victim to lung cancer after having never smoked in his life. But Bill Nyrup won 3 Stanley Cup rings with the Montreal Canadiens in the late 70s. And so that was a very, very special time for me, getting the chance to see those guys, because at that point in time, college hockey players weren't being drafted by the NHL. They usually had to sign as free agents, but that was really what got things going back for the collegiates.
Pete, Nashville, Tennessee, for those of us that haven't been to a hockey game, for those who have not been to a hockey game in Nashville, and I have been, but it's not the site where most of us would identify as a hockey crazy town. Describe for us a little bit, if you would, a little bit about Nashville and what it was like when they first had the expansion team, what the broadcasting was like, and how it evolved today with their fan base.
All right, happy to do so. So yeah, that was my first day here on the job was the first day of the first training camp. So September 12th of '98, and then 1 week later we had our first preseason game. We would hold hockey 101 classes. We had an auditorium in the building where we could accommodate about 70 to 100 people. And Terry Crisp was my broadcast partner, and I would answer any and all questions they might have, go over some of the basics of the game, and to tell them right off that no, we don't have 2 halftimes. We have 3 periods. So we have 2 intermissions to go through all of that, and that takes care of the concessionaires and everything. But from the outset, the enthusiasm was incredible. The first face-off against the Florida Panthers, a standing ovation, or as one of my favorite comedians, Norm Crosby, used to call it, a standing ovulation. So they had that right off the bat. And then we kept up with the classes, did that for several years. And now the team has been sold out every game for the last 3.5 seasons. And I have to say a half season because we didn't really complete this last one. We played 69 of 82 games. And the place is as loud as the United Center. When it comes to playoff time or big games late in the year, I carry a dB meter with me, and it registers about 120 dB, which is effectively like sitting on the runway at O'Hare and catching those jet noises with all the backlash that go in with that. So, and this team had come very close in 2007 to being moved. A man had come in, the man who was behind what was Research in Motion and the cell phone company, and he was going to move us to Hamilton, Ontario. And my contract said I'd have to go with the team. So I was preparing the house here for sale and getting ready perhaps to buy back in Buffalo and then commute across the bridge to go there to do the jobs. But local ownership stepped up, and things have been solidified ever since. And I think maybe the fact that we do have this largely locally based ownership group, it's split about 10 ways. I think that's helped the team be embraced by the community as much as it has been.
Wow.
Yeah.
Eric Nadell, the broadcast down here in the landmark Holtz, and and they were helpful when I first went into broadcasting. Their systems that they had developed were amazing for remembering previous years, and so how long? What kind of a system do you have? How long did it take you to develop it? And is it one of those elements that help you to have the tremendous recall?
Oh, sure. Absolutely, Jim. We have cheat sheets. And I remember how Eric did a lot of hockey in his early days, too. And, mentioning Central Illinois broadcasters after to the late Mark Holtz, got to bow my head in his direction as well. He was doing college hockey when I was. He was doing Denver University before he got the job in Dallas. So this was the systems we build. I have a spreadsheet that goes back and encompasses every game the Predators have played in their 21 plus seasons now. And I can go back to that, and it's pretty agile for me. I can go back to that, and I have many tabs at the bottom of that spreadsheet. And I recall too, when John Miller was doing the Rangers and you were playing, he showed me how he arranged things in the media guide for quick reference. All those little tricks you can pick up from many great veteran broadcasters. I had the very same thing that I learned from Bob Miller, who I worked with the Kings. And I also learned from Chick Hearn, when the teams are coming out and everybody is eating popcorn and they're going through their pregame warm-ups, do a mock broadcast to yourself and get your juices flowing and do things like that. For remembrance, it helps a great deal to have the nice memory, but every now and then you need those tickler sheets, Jim, that do give you the reminders that you need and you can pursue even further. But yeah, the preparation, I don't know of any broadcaster right now that goes in and sits down courtside in the press box and has done no preparation. You just need to do it. It helps in playoff series when you got the same team for up to 7 games. You don't have to do as much on them, but you do on your team.
I would think that things are moving so fast. I mean, I'm amazed by the ability to track the game. I mean, how did you learn to? I guess over time it's just natural for you.
Well, you learn how to cut down your verbiage a little bit. But the other thing that helps, we sit up so high that it effectively, like Wayne Gretzky always said, the key is to slow the game down for yourself. And Jim, I know you've said the very same thing, though you couldn't slow down Nolan Ryan's warm-up pitch that night. But that's just the way that goes. But when we sit so high, that your vision is much better. It slows things down. You can see the play coming your way or going away from you, and that helps out tremendously. One place, and I know a lot of minor league guys have to do it because they are in smaller buildings, the closer you sit to the ice, I think, the more difficult it becomes. Even though we had the outdoor game against the Stars on January 1st this last year, and I was so happy that I got my broadcast position tossed out of the Cotton Bowl press box, and because international TV wanted that, and they moved me down rinkside on the one blue line with a monitor to see the other end of the ice. That was fine for me.
Wow. Hey, Pete, I had a question for you.
Yeah.
During COVID, what are the challenges of broadcasting? I know most of the broadcasts are done, especially by the road teams, they have to do them remotely. Did you have to do that at all? And how do you think that the media is basically handling broadcasting during the pandemic?
All of the NHL broadcasters were doing their road games remotely. And matter of fact, the home broadcasters were too, because the teams were in these bubbles. So the Western Conference was in Edmonton. The Eastern Conference was in Toronto. And let me tell you, I talked about how high the broadcast booths are in many of the buildings. I saw the game in Edmonton far better doing it from the basement of our arena than I would have had I been in Edmonton, because there it is so high up and so far toward the back of the building, couldn't see it. Instead, I had 2 70-inch monitors in front of me and Hal Gill, my partner. And on one side was, as they call it, the all 12, so all 12 players we could see, plus the scoreboard clock. And on the right was the television feed. And after a while, that just became rather natural, and it was comfortable. It's also nice not to have to fly home from Edmonton after every game and just drive 8 miles from downtown Nashville back out here to my house. So it worked well, but there are drawbacks. And one of my good friends had one on Sunday. John Murphy is the voice of the Buffalo Bills now, and he's doing the Bills game at Miami from the broadcast booth in Orchard Park, New York. And all of a sudden, all the power to the TV truck in Miami went out. So he's having to essentially do like Ronald Reagan did back in the 30s and 40s, a recreation using the NFL.com play-by-play coming out, which comes out as close to real time as you can, and then call it. He got through that. They restored power to the TV truck by the time it was halftime, but then third quarter was delayed by a lightning delay for about 40 minutes. So he had a long, long day, and it's a good thing he is shall we say, an ambassador for an Irish beer company in Buffalo, because he had to have quite a bit of that available to him after the game was over.
Pete, this is Dick.
Yeah, Dick.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate Mike White for putting together 2 great back-to-back programs. This is spectacularly good, number one. Secondly, I always felt, wearing my Blackhawks shirt here, that the Blackhawks came of day on April the 24th of 2010.
Yes.
I don't know whether you have that on your cheat sheet or not, but
I'll never forget it. That was Game 5.
Yep, and that's exactly right. Very good. And the series was tied 2-2, and it was 3-2 in the third period, and it didn't look very good for the Blackhawks. And all of a sudden, with 13 seconds to go, shorthanded, my buddy. Hold on. My
Number
buddy,
88.
Patrick Kane.
Yep.
Came through and made a last second tying goal. And then one of the other stars of that team, Marian Hossa, comes through and wins the game in overtime. And at that point, the Blackhawks finally figured out that maybe they could actually never be out of a ball game, never be out of a hockey match. And they went on to win 3 championships in 5 years, and to me, one of the greatest hockey teams ever, with Taves and Kane and Duncan Keith and Jomerson and Seabrook, and Hossa, you could just keep on going. They were loaded, and it was great for the Chicago fans. And I'm sure you saw the celebration at Grant Park for 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
I mean, millions of people that were there, and that just doesn't happen. And hockey came back in Chicago, and all over the Midwest became Blackhawks fans, and still are today.
Well, and we can also talk about how Marty Erat and Jason Arnott should not have been playing catch with the puck at that point, because that resulted in Patrick Kane intercepting the pass. And by the way, I have seen Patrick Kane play since he was 8 years old. He's from South Buffalo. And he played with some sons of friends of ours there. So, and but they have grown up, and he's still the same height. So I don't know what's going on there. And we also know that Marian Hossa really should have been thrown out of that game when he boarded Dan Hamhuis, but instead they only gave him a major, and it's when he came out of the penalty box that he scored that game-winning goal. But all, as they say, spilt milk, because had the Predators even won that game and then come back and won Game 6 in Nashville, they would have had no place to play in the next round. We had a 100-year flood, they keep terming it, the very next weekend. We had raw sewage in the basement of our arena up about 3 or 4 cinder blocks high. And it was at that point in time where I realized I was blessed to have a deviated septum where I could not smell it. Or maybe it's deviant, I don't know. But in any case, really did a great job of interrupting my my olfactory senses. I said, Harry, you have a question? Did I say?
Yeah, I got a question. I learned all my hockey out at Lake Bracken from Dick
Yes.
Watson. And I just wondered, where did you learn about hockey to step in and start broadcasting? Because Costa didn't have a team.
No, it's actually, and because the St. Louis Blues hadn't even started until my junior year in high school, it was listening to and watching Lloyd Pettit do the Chicago Blackhawks. And I was blessed because when the Predators started, from the start, 98 until now, the farm club has been the Milwaukee Admirals. And who owned them when we got started? Lloyd Pettit. So I spent an awful lot of time with him during our training camps and getting more and more great stories out of him. Later on, of course, Dan Kelly came to St. Louis, but the first voice of the St. Louis Blues was somebody else. Jack Buck was the first voice of the Blues, and then they brought Dan Kelly down from Canada to do the Blues, and unfortunately we lost him before he even turned 60. His son now is doing the Blues games on television. But yeah, Harry, the excitement of hearing hearing Lloyd Pettit go, "There's a shot at a goal," was something that I will never forget. And I also remember the night where he sort of had a blooper about Bobby Hull hitting the effing post in the playoffs against the New York Rangers. And I heard WMAQ go silent for about 10 seconds.
Pete, do you have a favorite game that you broadcasted, or is there one that comes to mind when you hear that?
Yeah, all the sports. So hockey, there was a game here against San Jose in 2016, the year before going to the Cup final, that seemed like it would never end. And because of the earliness in the playoffs, we had an 8:45 local face-off time. And we're playing San Jose, and the game goes to triple overtime. And Mike Fisher scores the game winner at about 1:06 in the morning. And this was a school night. And I'm looking in the stands, and nobody has left. That's when I knew things really had caught on here. That was the best hockey game. The football game has to be the Bills beating the Raiders 51-3 to go to Super Bowl 25 in Tampa. And I had been down on the runway beforehand and saw Al Davis's minion, I'm going to call him a minion, down there on the phone on a, believe it or not, a phone booth, calling to make arrangements for the Raiders to go to Tampa. And I saw that and I said, well, boys, let's see if maybe Al Okasal is jumping the gun here a little bit. So that was a thrill. My post-game interview, just so you know, was O.J. Simpson, who was doing things for NBC at that point in time. We did a weekly sports talk show from his American Sports Grill there. Basketball has got to be Magic Johnson's rookie year and them winning the NBA championship over Philadelphia. And Magic had to jump center because Kareem had rolled his ankle in the previous game at the Forum. And so Magic came out and had that magnificent game that made Daryl Dawkins look like he never should have come out of high school. But other than that, I can't remember anything.
Hey, Pete, you've broadcast the four major sports. What's the easiest and what's the most difficult?
Now, people would say baseball is the easiest. I don't agree with that. The contrast between baseball and hockey is severe, no question. But I think in baseball, you become the fan's friend, or at least that's what you're attempting to do, and keep them entertained for a period of time. I was talking with Dan Horde from the Bengals, Cincinnati Bengals, yesterday. He had put a tweet out about the time he had done like 38 innings of baseball in 3 days when he was doing the Syracuse Chiefs. And we reminisced about those times. I had done a 20-inning game solo in Indianapolis back in 1986. Those are the challenges, but I think after you do those, it makes baseball a little bit easier. But the worst for me, or the most fun for me, has been baseball, without question. Hockey is maybe the most satisfying because of the test it provides you, and you have to meet that test every shift, every day, every game. And so after hockey games, I'm probably a lot more tired than than even after a 20-inning solo baseball game. And I remembered being with Albuquerque in Tucson in 1981. It was Holy Saturday night, the night before Easter. And all we had then for out-of-town scores was the perforated ticker tape coming across. And I see that Rochester and Pawtucket in the International League were going into the 30th inning. And I'm going, come on, guys, I know there is a curfew in that league. Well, the trouble was they couldn't find the league president, Harold Cooper, who was at a party someplace. And when finally they got a hold of him, he said, what are you doing? Shut that game down right now. And it turned out they resumed it 6 weeks later when Rochester returned to Pawtucket, and it took all of 8 minutes to complete. So that was a little bit different. Yes, Dick?
You know, there was a kid from Alleman that played in that game that we had as a Rotary program, Jeff Schneider.
Yep.
I don't know whether he would have played maybe about the time, Jim, you were playing basketball. I think he played for Don Morris. He was a baseball player too. In fact, he was in the game, and he tells the story about they stopped the game at what, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, Pete? I don't what.
Yeah, it was.
It was very late, and there was a Hispanic player that went home that night at 3 or 4 in the morning, and his wife said to him, "Where have you been? You've been out on the town, you know." She accused him of all kinds of things. He said, "No, we were playing the game," and he had to call somebody to verify it. And you're right, they went back and played, resumed the game the next day or maybe weeks later, and it was over with in 25 minutes.
Yeah, we had, by the way, an Alleman player with the Buffalo Bills who was the team's long snapper, Adam Linger, for many years.
Yep.
And I had dinner with him, Mick, a few years ago at Tom Reed's place in St. Paul, and now he and his wife have moved down to the Dallas area, so we're supposed to get together at some point this upcoming season, if indeed we get back to regular travel again.
Pete, how many years have you been with the Predators now?
22.
And how many years did it take you to get there?
Yeah, my overnight success story, I guess we'll have to go back to that day that Henry Aaron tied Babe Ruth in April of '74. So it was a 24-year climb through Notre Dame hockey, University of Buffalo hockey, Los Angeles Kings, Buffalo Sabres, even the Rochester Americans, who I helped out when they did television. They had Mike Keenan there, or as they call him, Iron Mike Keenan, the way he imposes his will on his players. So it was, like I told people, oh, so you're doing the Stanley Cup final here in 2018 or 2017. That's great. And I go, yeah. And it only took me 39 years to get here.
So all those 39 years to get there, it's interesting how that some of your, any one change in your life with the butterfly effect and you wouldn't be in Nashville. Would you share a little bit about your opportunity to be a radio station owner in Galesburg?
Sure.
That did not materialize?
Right. It did materialize later as CD something, right? Is that the station that became? Well, in any case, a family friend, because I was working at WGL early in my time there, which began in December of '72. I graduated a semester early. Asked me if I'd be interested in helping him put an FM station on the air. I did. Roger Coleman found out about it and then said, okay, you got to be done here. So I did a high school football game that Friday night in Rock Island, and then moved on to working for Mike White at Galesburg Cable TV. And that was a great experience for me as well. I don't know why this guy from Indiana on Facebook had that newspaper ad, Mike, but he did, and he sent it to me, and I then sent it to you to show what it was like back in those early formative days when, for a character generator at Galesburg TV, we used those same perforated tapes I had lived through in Tucson with the Albuquerque Dukes.
And a short story about Pete for the rest of you. He was, after he left WGIL, he had a summer in which he was actually in college at Notre Dame. And he was, we hired him to do sports on the local cable channel, Channel 7. So he had a 10 10-minute sportscast every night about 6:20. And he did a great job all summer long. And I was the program director, general manager that hired Pete. And I had 3 kids at home and was married and trying to pay all the bills and keep things going afloat, running a TV station without any revenue. Well, Pete was, let's say he was carefree and had lots of fun. And so one Friday, Pete decides to record the sports on his way out of town. In the morning, he would record it and then leave town, and we'd play the sports by videotape. Pete, do you want to tell him what you did?
Yeah, I think the best way to say this was I thought, who the heck wants to look at me on the screen for that long a period of time? We didn't have much in the way of graphics or tape to go to. So there was a very lovely lady who was our receptionist. Sandy Musselman, you said, Mike?
That's right. That's right.
So I gave her my script and my tape, but then, well, this was of the days, I think, maybe Dick Clark had done it, but it was lip syncing. So I had her stand on camera and lip sync to me and my verbiage. And that was my last night on cable TV in Galesburg.
So I'm doing the news at 6, broadcasting it, then the weather, and then they put Pete's videotape on. Everybody in the studio is laughing and thinking it's funny, except this guy. I didn't smile one bit. I'm thinking, if my boss sees this and I get fired, Pete Weber, you're in trouble. So Pete comes back on Monday. He had 4 more days to work, and I did not have a sense of humor when it came to my paycheck. So Pete comes in my office, and he's just smiling and chuckling about the sports broadcast. And I said, hey, Pete, how many more days you got left here? He said 4. I said, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and go to Notre Dame now?
Yep, that's the story. And was Mick even born by that point in time?
He was no.
Okay.
No, that was 1973, wasn't it, Pete?
Yeah, 73. Yeah, when I was also coaching Knox College hockey.
So Pete Weber got released or fired from Galesburg Cable TV and Galesburg WGIL.
Yep.
Thank goodness. So that enables him to end up with the Nashville Predators.
Yeah.
Pete, one thing I see, Will's got his hand up, and that means we're probably about ready to cut it off. But
Not really.
I want to mention.
Cox has a question whenever you guys have time.
Okay.
I want to mention to Pete, you are part of millions of people's family that you have never met and maybe never will, but because of what you do and the importance of what you do for Nashville and Tennessee and the central states there, I'm sure you know that, but you're a very important person down there, and to broadcast and to add enthusiasm to people's lives, just like baseball has come back and it's important to people's livelihood. You are a very important person to Nashville and Tennessee, and you're to be commended for a great career. And boy, oh boy, to be able to mention the names you've talked about, a lot of Peoria connections there with Chick Hearn and Tom Kelly and Jack Brickhouse and Lauren Brown. There's a bunch of them that go back, and you're just part of it. You just grew up in Galesburg instead of Peoria.
I got to do a Lakers game or 2 on the on-TV, over-the-air scrambled subscription service with Tom Kelly. And when the host introduced us, he said, here's a guy working with Tom Kelly tonight whose father used to wake him up so he could watch his sportscasts.
Yep. Yep.
So Trent has a question.
Oh, yes, Trent's right there with you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I was moving around. So, hey, Mr. Weber, it was an honor to hear your stories.
Mr. Weber was my dad. I'm just Pete.
Okay, Pete. All right. Well, you could be my dad, so we'll.
Is this Montel Williams? Are we going to do a check?
Boom. Boom. Well, I just had a question. Just kind of a funny thing. I mean, I think all of us probably, in sports, grew up as kids, and I thought one day I would be a commentator, and I always had like go-tos. Like when I was a kid, you were, calling a game or just discussing stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
do you remember something like that you did, or share that with us? Because I think it's always comical. Because I did it. I know probably everyone else has done it as well.
Well, let's see if I understand your question properly. When I was a kid and the Zenith radio was on my nightstand next to the bed, I frequently tuned to KMOX so I could hear Harry Carey and Jack Buck and even Joe Garagiola, who would come into my life later when I was at college. But I said, boy, it's obvious these guys are having fun doing what they're doing. I'm very young, right? This is in the late 50s. Later on, I found out they were getting paid for doing that. So I thought maybe I should try to find some way to get employed like that. And then later on, man, I was in Buffalo and covering the games in Toronto with the Blue Jays, and Harry came in with the White Sox for their first ever game. He took my dad's name and said hello to him on the White Sox network that day. And he was the guy that I think got me more focused than anything else into going forward in this career. Now, is that what you meant?
Yeah. Did you practice that when you were a kid? You were practicing Harry Carey and all the commentary impersonating like everybody else was doing?
Yeah, doing things like, here's Ken Boyer, popped it up. How'd he pop up that pitch? No. He was always rough as hell on Kenny Boyer. And that was very unfortunate, I think. And I know the Boyer family doesn't really hold a warm spot in their hearts for Harry Carey.
What's your, I'm curious because you've done so much travel, and I'm curious about your favorite city for restaurants and what might be your top of the list there.
I'd have to say for restaurants, it's Vancouver, British Columbia. Just incredible. And on top of this, and I must confess, I don't know if this is a meeting on a regular basis, but I am a salmonaholic. And hi, Pete. Glad to meet you. But I love salmon, and there's no place you get it better than in Vancouver at virtually any place you go. So that's one of my favorite places. And I also love being down on the pier in Santa Monica. I mean, that is a tremendous place to go there as well for seafood. So those are among my favorites, to be certain. But in Chicago, I've got to go to Ditka's. Virtually every trip, go to Ditka's and get, as it's listed on his menu, the pork chop. Now, if you recall, and some of you are old enough to recall, the Flintstones, and remember that Brontosaurus burger that would go on the side of Fred's car and tip it over, that's how big the pork chop appears to be.
That's great.
Matter of fact, Claudia and I held our 20th wedding anniversary party at Ditka's, and boy, did he take care of us.
That's great.
Well, everyone, I'm not trying to cut this short. I will abort the meeting, and then you can stay still and as long as you want. So that way, they'll just let people go back to work if they wanted to. So I just, Pete or Mr. Weber or Pete Weber, I am very honored to meet you. And I think our Rotary Club is honored to have you speak before us.
I'm honored to be asked. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. And at least now I can go between you and Jim and tell people I know some celebrities. And
right now you're on the screen right between us.
Here you go. Almost there. Yeah. So thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for your time, all of you. And Tom, tomorrow, 4:09 at the VNA, please. Tom Foley. Okay. And with that, again, if we have any volunteers for the following, not next Friday, the Friday after, please get to me. With that, I appreciate you all coming, and we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and folks, if you want to have any further questions of me, you can email me, Pete Weber, all one together, no dots, at bellsouth.net, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I do, however, have to take my wife to a doctor's appointment here very shortly.
Hey, Pete. Before you
Yeah.
leave, does your cell number still end in 2240?
642-2240.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
That
Enjoyed
is.
it.
Thank you, Mike, for putting all this together. And Tom, I hope that you don't need to go see a chiropractor after carrying all that hand sanitizer.
No, we were carrying it very carefully because, of course, Will is a physical therapist, and so he showed me how to carry it properly, Pete. So
Okay.
And so I survived just fine. But
Actually, Pete, I didn't show my light to him because I was looking for more patients. It was very slow. Right thing.
So it's a way of generating more business. Okay.
Here you go. That's how it works.
Love it. Guys, thank you so much for everything. And I can handle a question or two here before I leave, if you have any.
well, I've got a question about hockey, Pete.
Yes.
You're free, guys. You can stay as long as you want now.
Yeah. I'd have to admit I haven't watched a hockey game probably for a couple of years, but when I did, I remember they always had fights, and I never understood. It's the only seeming. I guess they have fights in baseball. Can you just comment on the fights in the sport, and do they still have just as many, or is it encouraged or not encouraged? And do you think it's good?
It's not as many as it was when I started, and we didn't have overtime in the NHL yet. When I started, the Kings and the Philadelphia Flyers would have these 4-hour games. Again, no overtime because they were constantly brawling. And on top of that, the Kings didn't do very well. They lost 30 consecutive games to the Flyers at the Spectrum. So we had to live through all of that. But they have brought in no more bench clearing brawls. Coaches get fines if somebody comes off the bench to join the 5 guys who are on, or 5+1 with the goaltender. They have those regulations. But what they have always felt in hockey, because they have seen it in the European version of the game, that it was sort of like a pressure cooker. Allow spontaneous combustion to occur, break it up when you can, and then things should be calmer the rest of the way. In the European game, there was a lot more stick work being done to get their frustrations out, and stick work, I think, is far more dangerous than the fist to the head that we have now. Does that answer your question, Tom?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Thank you very much, Pete. And I need to watch more hockey, obviously.
And but if you go look now, in the early days here, the Predators, there were some times when I would be in the hallway between periods and hear a woman go, "They haven't had a fight yet. What's going on here?" And it's most of the bloodlust seemed to come from the female fans.
How about Nashville, Pete? I was down to Opryland for a convention a year ago, and they were saying that it was growing like 1,000 a day or something, like some crazy figure. It's just growing like a weed down there, isn't it?
It is becoming, I think, Atlanta the second in terms of reaching out and then bringing more and more people in. The last count we had for construction cranes in the general downtown area was 37. 37 cranes. And thankfully, because what we're seeing now with the pandemic, more people have proven they can work remotely. So these are residences and not office space. So I think it's good that happened that way, rather than have ghost buildings like we have seen in many other locations. But yeah, Nashville, leaps and bounds, no question. From when I first stepped here, and I was here for baseball in 85 through 95. Buffalo and Nashville were in the same AAA league, the former American Association. So I had 3 or 4 trips here a year. And I really have, if I were to have time lapse in my head, that I could play back what that was like, because nobody was downtown when I first started coming here. Now it seems like everybody's downtown.
Yeah.
Well, and I hear about the music, and I hear that now there's blues in Nashville, and there's even jazz.
Oh, yeah. A friend of mine, as a matter of fact, does an online radio show from the old Acme Feed and Seed down on the river, and I'm not trying to do a show there for you. And guys, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to adjourn.
Okay, thank you.
But I was great to join you. You got my email and everything else. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Pete.